It is No Gifts, Please, the parenting podcast by the pair with no real gifts, but a whole lot of gumption. Hey there, I'm Steve Noviello.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jenny Anchondo.
So lovely to see you, as always. You know, I was talking with one of my mom friends who we joke about, we put 20 minutes on the clock for each of our episodes. We always go over, I know. But she was saying, your podcast is the perfect podcast for doing laundry or taking a morning walk in terms of its duration.
I do like the walk duration for sure. Yeah. I do look for a 20-minute span for Charlie's walk that he gets every single morning, rain or shine.
Wow. Lucky Charlie.
Morning and night. He is the biggest diva in the house.
Oh, you have that huge yard too. You can't just let him in the yard?
He doesn't use the restroom in the yard. He will only go number 2 on a walk.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing if I just stopped walking him, I guess he would have to go, but then I would also have to pick it up. So I'm like, I probably should be walking anyway. It's good for you.
You've got those terrazzo floors. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
Oh no. By the way, big update. No, he went in the baby's room.
Oh.
Yeah. He has not done that.
That's an aggression.
It's an aggression.
Hey, I'm now one less that I was, and then Brighton, and now the new baby, and now I'm okay. Well,
he understands, and
Charlie,
we understand.
Then I hope that Charlie listens to our podcast on his 20-minute walk.
Okay, I've been looking forward to this episode because we did an episode a while back talking about my IVF journey, my husband's IVF journey, and I thought, we've got to talk about your journey with Doug to get Jacob and Hudson. And really, I think that, I know that you have spoken about it a bit, but I have some more
detailed questions.
I was like, can I just kind of interview you?
Let's do it.
So when I was thinking about this and thinking about, okay, a lot of people know you now, right? They come to town, they come to Dallas. It's 2 dads, 2 boys. That's the great move on. But I'm thinking reversing back, looking when you and Doug were dating. Mm-hmm. Were you talking about kids at the time?
No, especially not at the beginning, because I think what's important for people to understand is that that's a dream that you dared not even dream. It wasn't even an option. So why would you even think about it? Heather Hayes and I did a podcast about this to kind of memorialize our surrogacy journey, which is also on YouTube, which is a bit longer format. So if you've got more questions, that's a great place to go. Just look up Noviello Surrogacy. And I remember she asked me, did you always want to be a dad? And I said, no, because who knew that it was a possibility? I mean, when I was a kid, particularly growing up in the 70s and 80s and knowing that I had this secret and that I was gay and all, that other kind of stuff, I mean, I was just hoping not to live my life in solitude forever. I mean, the idea of having a husband
to have a partner
and children,
wow,
was unthinkable. So why would you even plan on it? I mean, you may have did you always know you wanted to grow a tail? I mean, it's
just not.
I just can't.
So when did it become thinkable?
Actually, I remember reading an article. Do you remember Bennett Cunningham? He was a reporter at Channel 11.
No, I didn't know Bennett.
This is pre-you.
Okay.
His kids go to St. Mark's and I think Hockaday maybe, with Heather's.
Okay.
So, but I remember, and he was the consumer reporter at the CBS station, and I was, of course, at Fox. And I remember the local media critic did a story about how he and his husband went through surrogacy and had twins. And how they had each genetically contributed to the kids and whatever. And I remember reading that and thinking, wow, I can't even imagine being able to do that one day. But it was the first time I remember being that's just close enough to me to be this is an option.
It's interesting because it really is, for our kids, it will have always been around for the duration of their lives. It will always be a part of their normal. It'll be like
when I go to school now but the kids are like, oh, you're Jacob's dad. Jacob has 2 dads.
Yeah.
Boom. What's for lunch?
For us, you were really there during the transitional period of just improved technology with, reproduction, surrogacy, normalcy, societal acceptance, all of those different things. So was it you or Doug that was like, okay, hey, so crazy idea. Should we have kids? How did that come about?
I think it was kind of both of us. I was, listen, our personalities. If there was one of us who was the spearheader of all of the organizing and doing and moving parts, and that was me, right?
Of course.
But not because Doug had any less interest in it. And honestly, at the time, I remember that actually concerned me. I was like, like I'd be like 80% and he'd be like 90%. And then I'd be 90 and he'd be 70. And then like we maybe sometimes we're 60-60. Like I was like, you know what? I want a new car. I obsessively am online looking for any spy photo and any tech specs and and I'm driving to dealerships hoping that they've got this one, and I was like, gosh, shouldn't I be just as like excited about having a child? And for those of you who are listening who are like, well, I think, yeah, it's like, well, there's not really a downside to getting a new car, right? Like there's a lot of upside, right? Sure. So like, of course there was trepidation for both of us. And frankly, even we joke about it. I remember even the day that when Jacob was born, which after all of that planning was like the most chaotic day ever. We didn't realize he was coming that day. It was like, oh my God, we're going to be dads. Like this is forever.
Yeah, forever. And like nobody's coming, like the surrogate's not coming home with you.
She's not.
She may show up for parties occasionally.
She comes for Thanksgiving.
Will be your friend.
She came again this year.
She will be your friend, but she's not coming back. So you decide to go down the journey is the first step. And I think a lot of people actually, unless they've been through it, really don't know how this works. Was it a two-pronged process where you're picking an egg donor and a surrogate, or was it or gestational carrier, or were they one and the same? Or
no, so it's two different people. And we actually, long story short, because I know we're tight on time here, we did not use an agency. We did it independently.
You're out there on the streets looking for eggs?
Facebook is where we found our surrogate.
Okay. For the surrogate. Okay.
Yeah. We joined a matching group on Facebook, which I was like, no, I mean, I've sold a sofa on Facebook, but like, I mean, I don't know that uterus rental is a category in the marketplace, but
come to find out.
We found her. We had come very close with another woman who had to suddenly like leave town because of some allergy her son had or whatever it was. And I remember I was kind of, again, just as you go through this process and you think you're about to get there and then there's a setback and now suddenly you're 3 steps back, right? So I was looking yet again for a surrogate, and I was going through all of the old messages and stuff from people from what I had posted in this group, like, hi, my name is Stephen Doug, but we'd like to have a family, whatever. And this girl, Jennifer, who have you met her before?
No, I have only seen her in photos. Yeah. I feel like I know her from Thanksgiving photos.
She's the best. Had reached out to us at the time and was like, hey, I just was a surrogate for the first time for someone else, so I can't do it for you. But just best of luck. And if there's ever anything you need or have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I was like, you know what? Like I wrote to her and I said, we're not planning on doing this for like another 9 months because again, planning, right? Like thinking like we had any control over any of that. We were like, well, we definitely want a September baby. So we're going to.
Darling of the two of you to try to plan a baby like that.
We're born in December and February years later.
Yeah.
But, so we got together and it was like, okay, let's talk about this. And the thing that we loved about her was, first of all, there were non-negotiables, right? You had to be okay with a same-sex couple. Nothing we can do about that.
Sure.
At the time, we thought we wanted to try and have twins, so we needed you to be okay with carrying twins. Our IVF doctor wanted a certain medical protocol, I think for the progesterone. He wanted injections instead of suppositories because they were easier to track. So you had to be okay with that. And those injections it's like an oil, right? I mean,
Steve, I still have numbness in my rear end
from
those injections. Yeah, it's no joke.
It's right. It's not
you
for
pay
everybody.
A premium for someone to
Correct.
do that. Yeah.
And we also wanted somebody who had done it before because we felt like somebody from the 3 of us should know what the heck is going on here.
And it wasn't going to be
and it wasn't going to be me. The 2, I mean, trust me, again, we've joked about this before. We thought we needed 2 eggs and we were going to be good to go because we only wanted 2 children. But so we said, why don't you get out your old contract and make any changes that you'd like to see and then send it to us. And it was kind of a serendipitous moment. First up, because the contract had been reviewed by the same lawyer that we were using. Oh. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a green light from the universe. Yeah. And the second thing that I loved about her is you would think that a lot of people would be like, okay, I'm going to adjust some things to my advantage. She actually subtracted things. She was like, you know what? I got an allowance for like maternity clothes. I don't really need them. I have them. So save your money.
Wow, so you knew she was a beautiful person.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, and really it was, look, there's obviously a financial element here and people have asked, okay, what
is it? What's the range?
You should, if you are thinking of a number in your mind, you should expect that the number is going to have 6 digits in it.
Yeah.
it just, and maybe it won't, but it probably will, because for us, there were several setbacks, but with each of the kids, it definitely did.
And that's per child? Or
it was per child.
Per child.
Which is why, by the way, so many of us have twins.
That include, true, yes. Does that include the egg? Oh, I guess you're not doing a retrieval because you're getting a donor.
Well, well, she got paid $10,000 each time just as her fee. But then there's all the medical protocol that you have to pay for.
The transfer.
The procedure.
Actual IVF process.
For her, the procedure of like retrieval, the actual medical procedure, like her fee was $10,000 to show up. And then there's also the like all the medications to jack up her body to produce eggs, to, all of that stuff that it's out of pocket, right? I mean, there were no benefit. My company now, by the way, has surrogacy benefits. I think they reimburse like $35,000, which, while it's not going to cover everything, is certainly better than a sharp stick in the eye. But at the time, I mean, there was no benefit at all. Yeah. So it was like you gotta.
So you went down the road, and she ended up getting pregnant eventually.
Yeah. So it took a couple of, and again, so that process of like, okay, there's so many things, right? Okay, how many eggs did we get? How many fertilized? How many got to day 3? How many got to day 5? How many
And tested? You had to do testing. She wanted boys.
Right, we wanted boy. We knew we wanted to do genetic testing because we wanted to know the gender of the kids in advance. And then, of course, that tells you about any genetic abnormality.
Yeah, you want to know.
I mean, I think with the first time we retrieved something, it was a phenomenal number, like 70 something eggs from this woman. And by the time we got to the finish line, we each had like 2 boys each, maybe, to transfer. Yeah. We were very good at making girls. We were not as good at making boys. And then the day for the transfer came, and the airport where they do the genetic testing was closed because of an ice storm. So our surrogate was already and jacked up on all of her meds. And then we had to stop that.
And you have like a finite window. It's a finite window. It's like within minutes.
We had to.
You have to do it.
We had to refreeze, and then we tried again, and then we didn't get pregnant. And it was like 3 or 4. Then we had to do another egg retrieval, and it was like, oh my god. Then could we split a cycle with another couple there was a waiting list for this woman. We were like, oh my gosh. And I remember going to the IVF doctor's office, and I was like, dude, what do we do? I'm running out of money. I'm running out of patience. This is a lot harder than we thought. Because again, just like you mentioned, and what I loved so much about your IVF journey is you were so transparent with people about it. For us, it's like it's like, oh, look at us. We just had twins.
Just do IVF. There's no such thing as just do IVF.
Right. So I remember going in and saying to him, like, what do we do here? And he said, you know what, guys? I see a lot of people come through my office, and they don't have near the relationship that you guys have with this girl. You're in here cutting up. You care for each other. She's kind. She's not crazy. I mean, he's like, let's just try it one more time. Let's try it one more time. Let's sync everybody up. Let's do a fresh transfer. We'll time it out, or we'll time out the donor, and we'll time out the surrogate, and we'll never freeze anything, and we'll just do it. And that was in June, I want to say. And we got pregnant. We got pregnant with Jacob, and I remember because we got many calls telling us it didn't work or that something bad happened. And those calls always came at the end of the day. But when my phone would ring, I remember I was anchoring the noon news, and I was like, okay, I know, because I would, good news would come around 11:45 is when he made his phone calls. They're getting the lab
results in and everything. Yeah.
Bad news came at the end of the day. And that phone rang, and her and I were talking, and we're like, I mean, we did everything different. I was like, are you going to tell, and sure enough, she was pregnant. And it was, I remember she had sent us, and we still have it. It's a picture, when you walk in our house, there's all those photos, that photo mosaic. One of them is of her pregnancy test. And she took the test in the morning, and she showed it to us before we even got the phone call to verify that it was happening. And I was it's a life-changing moment. I mean, it is a life-changing moment. And because we were like, are your boobs sore? Are you tired?
Right.
Like what? Like
immediately.
What do we, I was a mess the entire time. I was, you get the benefit of being with your baby.
I do. It is a huge benefit. I think that would be really hard.
It was very hard because again, she was so chill that we'd get to an appointment. I'd be like, so how's the baby? And she'd be like, yeah, it's not really moving very much today. And I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
Like, well, maybe a little, why don't you have some orange juice or something spicy or,
Yeah. Did you try to micromanage her situation at all? Or did you have such a good
yes
relationship
and no.
with her?
Like, I mean, listen, we said we want you to treat your body the way that you would if you were pregnant with your own child. I'm not going to micromanage, you or anything. We are doing this because we trust you. You are a complete stranger, but we trust you.
But we found you on Facebook.
But we found you on Facebook.
So we know you're good.
And we know, right? We trust you to do this. She was great. I mean, so much so that we went back a second time.
In over the course of this process, though, you guys went through a lot of loss.
We did. So we, with her, we went through the loss of really just not getting pregnant.
Yeah.
That was really rough. After her, so we really wanted to do it immediately, and we had found another person. This one was out of state, but it was like, okay, I mean, there's only so many women willing to do this, right?
Sure.
That had its own challenges of like, every time she would fly in, like not to be, whatever, but I'm like, you're a stranger. I don't know if I want to entertain you for 3 days. Why don't you bring a friend?
Right.
That way you have somebody to hang out with, so we would do that kind of stuff. And I remember we got pregnant with her. It was right around Christmas and we were so excited. And then there was because she was being monitored at her,
her normal OB.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And we were having like a video call for like the sonogram. And they put the thing on. And I remember as soon as I saw the image, I was like, oh, there's nothing in there. She had been pregnant.
Yeah.
Totally pregnant. There were some issues with like, is it
like the heartbeat or being strong enough,
right? And is the baby growing and that kind of stuff, which amazes me the way that they can like. I mean, it's like, is that everything really accurate? And I remember I was at the airport because I was going home from my grandfather's funeral, and it was like, oh my God, we just like, what? How am I going to hold it together? And I called Jennifer, our first surrogate, because she was always like, what? Because that was also weird. I have to be honest. Like, it was like, I want to talk with you about this, but I also don't want you to feel like there's this other woman. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I don't, know.
Well, and also it's like, okay, she got her paycheck because she moved on with her life.
Right.
And then Steve's like, hey, can we talk about my reproductive journey?
And she was like, you know what? Like, why don't we, because we had thought that her doctor was like, okay, like, that's it. Like, you've had twins of your own. You've had a daughter of your own. You've been pregnant with another surrogacy. You've had Jacob, which is a surrogate. That's 5. That's 4 pregnancies, 5
cap.
Right. She had a, C-sections and she's like, you know what? But there's a difference between like, can we do this? Wouldn't it be cool? And like legit, she's like, why don't we go to my doctor and ask? She's like, I would love to do it again for you guys. And I was like, all right, but let me go with you because I don't want us to go through that. And then me be like, well, what did he say? Did you ask this? Like what? I was like, let's go together. And I remember the doctor walked in and he looked at us. He goes, "Are we getting the band back together?" And I was like, "Can we?"
Okay.
And he was
Enough
like,
time had passed.
He was like, "Why not?" And we were like, "Well, remember, like she had placenta previa, which I'm not even sure what that is. Things were not in the right spot, or there were things, right?" And he was like, "You know what? Anything that I would be concerned about, we can monitor for." I was like, "Yeah, but like the C-section and the scar," and he's like, "No, the lining is fine. All of the things." And I was like, okay. And I remember we had said to our IVF doctor, who had worked with all of us for a couple of years at this point,
right.
Can we skip the mock cycle? Can we just put her on the meds and like, let's, and he was like, yeah, he's like, why not? And first try, we got pregnant with Hudson.
Oh my gosh. And that's
first
Hudson.
And that's Hudson.
And
we used the same egg. So because people ask us about the genetics.
Genetically.
The boys are genetically related by their egg donor.
Yeah.
One of them has my DNA. One of them has Doug's DNA.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's something that I still to this day kind of grapple with. At the time, I remember we were like, it's very important that we don't want to know. And now I'm like, oh, I kind of wish we did know. And then other days I'm like, no, I wish we didn't know.
Yeah,
like,
you don't think you figured it out?
I don't. Sometimes I think I have. I mean, and honestly, I love when people are like, oh my God, this one looks just like you. Because in my crazy mind, there was like...
They both look like Doug?
they both look like Doug, or one looks like Doug and one looks like neither of us. And whatever the scenario is, I come up short.
I can I completely relate to just.
And then I'll be like what? In
wondering.
fact, Doug. So it was. It's silly. Well, it's not silly because it was really painful. Honestly, we were sitting at home one night and like our TV had like scrolled over to like showing like pictures on someone's phone, and like Alexa had identified, like AI had identified like who was who, and there were pictures coming up. I think it was of Doug's family or something, but they were being labeled as one of the kids who at the time I thought was genetically related to me, and he was like, and I was like,
so then you're
sobbing.
like, oh, they're both
right. And he was like, what? Like, and he's like, if it's such a big deal, why don't you get tested? I said, because I'm so scared. What if I would rather go through life not knowing that I'm neither than knowing that I would rather just not know. And it was maybe a couple of weeks later, and he came home, we were going to bed, and he was like, here, and he handed me an envelope, and I was like, what is this? He's like, it's to help you sleep better. And I was like, what is it? And I opened it up, and it was a paternity test that he had done apparently with both of our kids.
And one of them
was like, you are 99.999 the father of this genetically, genetically related to this child. And the other one, there's no chance in hell. Yeah. And I was like,
Doug.
I mean, you know what my first thought was? He tested one of the kids on the dog.
Stop it! You psycho!
Totally.
I mean, I totally relate to
nuts,
it.
But I feel like this is why we get along so well.
This is completely something I would do. And I would completely jump to conclusions like, oh, which one of your friends took the other test?
I mean, couldn't you have like taken my hair off my hairbrush and like done both of us?
Oh my gosh. I love that he did that. That is honestly such a sign of
such a Doug thing.
Acknowledgement though to you and your feelings. And this stuff is just it's very complicated. It's very scientific, but also very emotional. And then I go forward to the boys. What's their understanding of it?
So we tell them, I sometimes for their bedtime story, I tell them the story of Jacob and Hudson, because that was another thing. It was like, how do we find literature? How do we find, and I'll be honest also, like my kids have two dads. I don't want them to be their whole identity. Right. And that was a big stumbling block for me into having children. Look, when I was a kid, I was endlessly tormented and bullied for being gay and called all sorts of terrible names, and really just felt less than for a very long time. Very uncomfortable in my own skin, very aware that the things that I was naturally inclined to do were not appropriate for little boys to have interest in at all. And that hurt a lot. And the idea that my children would be put through that, not because of them, but because of who I am, broke my heart. Yeah. That has not been our experience, right? Luckily. So far, the kids are not in middle school
yet.
They're
young, yeah.
And I do have some fears around that. But you know what? That's why I show up as a parent. I show up, I volunteer, I'm on the PTA, I'm making friends with the other parents. The kids in their classroom know who I am. They know that I'm one of Jacob's dads. And we've had some really funny, like I was working cafeteria duty not too long ago, and we've talked about this before. There's two other sets of gay dads that we're friendly with that they have. One of them, there's three kids with gay dads in kindergarten because there's one set of twins. And then Jacob and his buddy are both in our class, and his buddy has the same gay dads that have the two twin girls. And I was working the cashier, and one of the kids came up and they're like, oh, you're Reed's dad. And I was like, close, you're on the right track. But
that's the other two dads.
The other set of
I remember when Brighton realized it. She said, Jacob has two dads. Jacob has two dads. Jacob has two dads. Jacob has two dads. And then she just walked away.
That was
like
it?
She just realized it, and then she's just known it. Right. And so I think there will probably be, then, there's other discussions of like, can dads have babies? Right. No, they have to have a surrogate.
Well, so we and if you're looking for literature, there's this great book called Entangle Makes Three, which is a story. It's a true story about two gay penguins that lived at Central Park, literally true story, that, kind of they saw all the other penguin couples having babies, and they had like a rock that they would sit on waiting for. And one day the zookeeper gave them an egg that had been abandoned, and they took turns caring for it and sitting on it and heating it and whatnot. And eventually it hatched, and they raised this child, this baby penguin, as their own. They literally they live at Central Park.
What's the name of the book again?
And Tango Makes Three.
Makes three.
It's one of if you're
tip.
familiar with Texas politics, it's one of the books that's up for being banned.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm like why is that sounding familiar to me? Okay, well that's a great tip for explanation.
It's a good resource,
it'll be
yes.
One of those conversations. It's like because I don't know, do any of us really ask like, well, how exactly was I born? I think that some kids really have
Yeah.
It's a strong interest in it, and some will never really think about it.
You know what? Again, it's just like, I remember my first day when we moved to Dallas, and I walked into my new office for the first time, the new office building, to the newsroom, and I put a picture of Doug and I on my desk, and one of the people who was very nosy came over. She said, "Who's that?" I said, "Oh, that's my boyfriend." And she said, "Do they know you're gay?" And I said, "If not, I have a feeling they're about to." It's like, I think that the more normal you are, it's like,
do I know this?
You do, and I'll tell you.
I can't wait to make guesses later.
The more just, it is what it is, right? Like, I know that we're not everybody's cup of tea, and the way that we have our children. In fact, I remember when Jacob was born, the feedback that we got on Facebook, and this is a long time ago, right? There was a lot of really awful things that people were saying on the station Facebook page when they announced that we were having kids, that we had kids. That we had our first baby. It was a lot of, this poor child, 2 fathers, but also a lot of like, IVF, how could you possibly, you're playing
There's
God.
A lot of negativity with IVF in general.
A lot of negativity about that. What are you doing with all the other embryo? A lot of all of those, things. But I will say this, here's the good news. By the time Hudson was born, 22 months later, and we posted again that we had our second child, a lot of that conversation had changed. A lot of the comments were overwhelmingly like, "Wow, I'm so glad you guys had another one. You're such great dads. We're really enjoying." I mean, people are, and again,
times have changed quickly.
And it's just, I'm very matter of fact about it, right? There's nothing I can do about who our family is, but you know what? Being a dad is the greatest joy of my life. Not every moment of every day, right? It's trying.
Thus the podcast.
Right. Thus the podcast, right? But like, I remember our biggest fear was, what if we have these, because we had a good thing going, right? Like,
totally
2 incomes, traveling. I mean, our 10-year anniversary, Hawaii and Australia and New Zealand. And like, I mean, and we were like, what if great circle of friends? And I mean, cute little house where nobody broke anything or drove their cars into my moldings. I mean, we thought, what if we have these kids and our life changes and we don't like it? We can't go back. And it's like, life has changed, but in the most wonderful ways possible. And you know what? We still do stuff, but my interest is also, my interests change. I'm definitely
crazy how like disinteresting those other things kind of are now. Or well, listen, I don't know if you feel that. I don't know.
You know who I'm married to. So for him, he's like, thank God. I don't have to do anything else.
Finally.
But, and that's also something that we have allowed each other space for, right? Like we have certain hours of the week, like Saturday mornings is a 4-hour block. That's my time for me where he has the boys. Sunday morning, he's got a 4-hour block of, or whatever the amount of time is where we know no matter what happens in the week, we've got that time to get our stuff done, to be by ourselves, whatever it is. But then, as time goes on, you're like, oh gosh, you guys are going to the park.
Yeah,
I want to go to the park. Like I won't run my errands,
No, completely.
Yeah.
You guys are such great dads.
You're very
love
sweet.
having you both in our life. I think that you're great examples to your boys, and they're truly lucky to have you. I'm so glad that you were able to, they really are to share your story and to be able to have this just like documented, just like your YouTube episode, to have this documented, just to share a little bit about the journey, because certainly there's somebody out there that's searching around, poking around, thinking that, for them, children were never an option.
Right.
And sort of seeing that renewed hope. And I hope that they come across this podcast as just like, how it worked out for you and sort of the realities of it, but also, the treasures that come at the end.
Yeah, and again, this has kind of been a very kind of high level overview of what the deal was. So I will encourage people, if you're on YouTube and you want to search Noviello Surrogacy, it's a much more in-depth look at what it was that we went through. And I will say one of the other great joys has been kind of coaching other same-sex couples through this process, people who don't know us at all, that we meet online through these forums and stuff. And I'm like, you know what? Hey, we didn't use an agency. If you're thinking about going independent, call me and like, let me walk you through it. And there have been several of them who have gone on to become dads, which is kind of great.
That is really cool.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, again, and I'm not just, blowing smoke here, but I mean, listen, we certainly knew each other at work when we worked in the same building years ago, and we were certainly friendly. And I certainly was at your wedding, all of those kind of milestone things. But like, having like you as a parent friend, I mean, it's just,
another level.
It's a whole level. It's a whole other level, which I absolutely enjoy. And you know what? We hope you enjoy joining us every week, every Tuesday morning when a new episode comes out. You can find us everywhere that podcasts are available. Go ahead and have some kids, or at least find yourself a friend you don't need to clean the house for. Start there.